to this on-demand webinar on team care and compassion. This is one of two shorter on-demand options that were developed due to the popularity of the self-care and compassion 2-hour live workshop. It focuses on important highlights in working with teams in crisis and challenge. The self-care highlights appear in the other video. My name is Michelle Durr, and my company is Anava Consulting LLC. I say Anava is the sweet spot between strength and humility. You can read more about me on the About Us page of my website. I am a former wildlife biologist and believe that 90% of wildlife management is people management. I focus my business on people. I serve as a national faculty member at the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, facilitating several workshops in conflict resolution, cooperative language, and internal dialogue. I am an alumni member and coach for the National Conservation Leadership Institute. I begin and end these sessions with compassion. As the Dalai Lama states, compassion is actually a sign of strength, and crisis requires strength. Compassion actually binds us together like the strands of a rope. Coronavirus, an example of a giant adaptive challenge, has tested our very way of life, and no one is immune from its effects. The basic human needs of security, belonging, and significance are being tested. For some, working from home is a new experience. I have worked from home for most of my career, but it takes time and discipline to settle into a good routine under regular circumstances. Some may not have child care available, so they have to regularly feed, care for, and play with children alongside work. Some are adding the responsibility of teaching children who would normally be gone for 6 hours or more during the day. Some may have ailing or susceptible family members and can't care for or connect with them. There is a fear of an actual job loss. Consider these things as you work with your team. Kindness, caring, and compassion are needed for everyone in challenge. There is no clear solution. Everyone is adjusting and learning together. Assume that your team is doing their best. Have compassion for yourself as well. Leaders, it is not your job to overprotect your team. Just like parenting, overprotection can be destructive and actually lead people to believe they're not capable. Trust that your team is capable of getting through change and demonstrate and encourage compassion. Have conversations about struggle. It is what brings us together. In my experience in the field of conservation, many are uncomfortable talking about or expressing emotions. It is true that we must not let our emotions dictate our behavior. At the same time, it is beneficial to have skills to identify emotions because they provide clues to conflict resolution. I've put together a list of negative emotions that I would expect during an epic challenge like coronavirus. These are all normal. Every single one of these is to be expected during major disruption. In live workshops, I ask attendees to share their emotions, and each of these has been selected at some point. People express frustration, feelings of uncertainty, and helplessness. Some have expressed anger over leadership not communicating, not talking about expectations, and not understanding the unique circumstances of significant change. Many people expressed multiple emotions. The word whiplash was used by one individual to describe the daily and even hourly shifts between various emotions. This creates experiences of overwhelm. Leaders have an opportunity to connect with teams by expressing feelings and overwhelm too. Acknowledge emotions around change as well as the pain and loss. Validate and normalize these emotions to connect with others. Now, acknowledging emotions doesn't mean you must accept bad behaviors. Address the behaviors and don't avoid real and normal emotions. To overcome negativity bias, the bias our brain has toward looking for threats, research says to compensate that bias with 5 to 7 positives. Crisis creates a lot of negativity. An amazing amount of creativity and positivity shows up too. Look at how people come together after natural disaster. Purposely look for ways the positive is showing up on your team. Encourage staff to submit and share these stories and other inspirations. Encourage team members to take turns being responsible for positive and inspirational interactions. Celebrate big and little wins. Ask, what is working for us? What did you try? Or maybe even asking the team to submit a response to this statement. You can encourage me by, and fill in the blank. Notice how people are caring for each other. Consider setting aside time in meetings, both physical or virtual, with the focus on positives, preferably at the end, so people leave on a high note. Here, I'm relating stress to the concepts of adaptive leadership. In adaptive challenges, the productive zone of disequilibrium, shown in the green area, is the space where the good stress, or eustress, occurs. It's the kind of stress that results in positive movement. When there is too much heat in the system, the limit of tolerance is reached. Crisis puts many into this zone, which in terms of stress is called distress. Time of great chaos and change is not the time to introduce more heat or stress into the system. People are looking for order, relief, and comfort. All adaptive challenges have no easy solutions. There is loss, and you might even say significant grief in that loss. People's loyalties become clear in crisis, as do their values. Coronavirus brought out quickly those acting selfishly and those acting in the interest of the whole. The hoarders and the helpers, the various factions. Notice the pressure and heat and adjust by doing things that can reduce the stress. I offer an easy test for taking action. Ask yourself, is what I'm thinking about doing useful or useless? In the live workshops, participants have been engaging on this concept, so I'm expanding it here. What is useful at this time is to brainstorm and lay out a communication plan for your team. Check in and connect regularly with your team as a whole and with each individual. Ask how they are doing with work and at home. There wasn't really ever a separation between those, but now many are balancing everything at home. Let them know you care. Watch that the language of your communication is encouraging and not discouraging. Be brief, clear, and concise. Think of a newspaper headline. What is the key information they need, and leave everything else out. Let your team know how often you'll update them, and then follow through on that commitment. Consider short updates once a week. Depending on your situation, you may want to send key updates at other time frames. The point is to schedule them so they aren't overwhelming people with information. You also don't want to feel the pressure of responding to everyone at all hours or times of the day. It is okay to say, I don't know. Pretending you do know can damage trust. Keep track of frequently asked questions and consider posting them on a place where staff can refer, and prioritize keeping them updated. I found the link on this slide to be a great resource for ideas on communicating with your team. On the other hand, it is useless to randomly communicate to your team, to ignore or avoid communication and connection because you don't have the answers or you don't know what to say. Long communications with too many points that lack purpose are useless too. Your communications will not be very helpful if they are focused on predictions or lack empathy. Again, ask, is this communication really useful? If you haven't already done so, it's never too late to talk about expectations. Consider the uncertainty and significant change. It's important to communicate realistic expectations that take each team member's personal situation into consideration. And be flexible about how to meet expectations, giving more freedom than less. Now is also a great time to talk about boundaries. For your teams, encourage people to designate work times on shared calendars or share calendars with each other and honor those schedules. It isn't realistic for people with families at home, especially small or school-aged children, to think they aren't going to need to change up their work schedule. Also, designate times where you are open to calls from your team and when you are working but unavailable to talk unless there is an emergency. Be even clearer about what and who to contact about changes due to the situation. Protect yours and your team's boundaries for everyone's sanity at this time. It is useless to assume people know what the expectations are, so don't avoid having the conversation. Micromanaging is never a good thing, but now it will just add extra stress to the system, as will rigidity. Micromanaging is a trust and control issue. Both are problematic. Consider this situation an opportunity to have discussions about how best to work together. The clearer the expectations and boundaries, the better the relationships will be. Similar to expectations, have a specific discussion about productivity. Make sure priorities are clear and your team is working on those at the top. It is unrealistic to think that the same level of productivity will exist on your team, especially for the families being completely disrupted. Again, see this as an opportunity to really shape the team's priorities. Focus on short time frames as much as possible. I suggest setting weekly or bi-weekly priorities for now. At the end of each week, check in with the team. Celebrate accomplishments and progress, even small ones, to help overcome the negativity bias. You might even point where you see teammates really helping each other and celebrate that too. Then ask, what do we need from each other to make more progress next week? Keep track of what you see working well with your team, and those positive behaviors can continue beyond the crisis. People often say how much time they waste in meetings. As a facilitator, I suggest when agenda setting that you also define a desired outcome for each portion of the agenda. That helps you decide how each agenda item can be treated. For example, brainstorming sessions are run very differently, especially online. You may have to plan ahead and require homework. These are general suggestions for every meeting and even more necessary for virtual meetings. Consider reducing meeting time by focusing on one or two top priorities only. If updates are given, set time limits, no more than 3 to 5 minutes, which will require speakers to focus the narrative. Consider ways that will get all participants to contribute, not just your most vocal extroverts. Be creative about using chat boxes, polls, and round robin to engage everyone. It is unrealistic to think that you can simply convert a day or multi-day staff meeting to virtual and change nothing else about how it's conducted. I've included a couple of links to posts I've written about meetings for more information. It is useful to ask, what is the opportunity here? What can we do to act better as a team? How can we use this crisis as a way to have conversations about how we want to behave with each other that we haven't done before? It is useless to remain on the defensive and stuck in struggle. Gratitude is a great antidote to negativity bias. Be creative about ways to express gratitude for your team and for individuals in your office. A little appreciation goes a long way in building relationships and making progress. I put expect optimism in the useless category, not because there shouldn't be optimism. I am an optimist and think there is gold in this struggle. However, I don't expect optimism from others, and telling people to be optimistic when they are deeply struggling is not helpful. Instead, go back to validating the emotions and acknowledge the struggle, but focus on progress made. If you want to do your best work, be the best leader and team player, you must be in good shape mentally and physically. For all of the work to do in conservation, we need people bringing their best gifts, and you can't do that if you are not taking care of yourself. Leaders must demonstrate this with teams, setting aside rest time, movement time, and focus time, protecting those and encouraging the team to do the same. Think of yourselves as a team of football players. Everyone needs to be at their best to win the game. Your game just happens to be conservation. There is another on-demand webinar that goes into self-care during this crisis. I hope you'll check that out too. In the self-care video, I do suggest having a support team and go into that in more detail. Leaders sometimes feel extra pressure to be the support for their team, but leaders need their support team too. Make note of people in each of these categories. The best leaders reach out to others to help identify blind spots and obtain different perspectives. It is your job to provide support for your team. At the same time, don't be overprotective. Consider asking team members this question: what would support you right now? Then teammates will know exactly what each person needs. Having a conversation like this brings people closer. It might also uncover ways to act as a team once the crisis subsides. This comes from Kristen Neff, compassion expert. Compassion is the antidote to our brain's automatic response mechanism of fight, flight, and freeze. Empathy and kindness are ways to counteract the flight mode. It doesn't mean you don't have to get the work done. Just realize that people are struggling. Stress levels are high. Acknowledge this is difficult for all of us and keep moving through kindness. Understand that we are all struggling is what aligns us as humans. Our common humanity is the way to counteract flight mode. We want to flee the struggle, but because we share this one, we can come together better as a team. Mindfulness practices, methods to settle the body and mind and become more aware of our emotions without judgment, are antidotes to staying stuck in struggle. Acknowledge and validate first. Take mindfulness breaks for yourself and suggest breaks for your team. Be mindful of the extra stresses. Know that people may be acting out of the extra stress, and take time to acknowledge the situation without judgment. Start with compassion, assuming people are doing their best, and end with compassion. If we care and support each other, we will be well as a team. Today, I covered the emotions and the importance of validating all of the emotions people are experiencing right now. I mentioned a few of the ways to overcome negativity bias, including spending more time in positive emotions, expressing gratitude, and having conversations. I talked about good and bad stress using the adaptive leadership framework and the importance of reducing some heat during this time. I suggested you ask yourself, is what I am doing useful or useless right now? And provided some examples around communication, expectations, and boundaries, as well as meetings and a few more. I talked about how to begin and end with compassion as we all struggle through this situation. And finally, I mentioned the importance of self-care and demonstrating that as a leader, and referred you to the other on-demand workshop for more details. Please thank the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and specifically the MAT team, for providing this service to the conservation community. And I thank them for the opportunity to provide this information to you. I hope I've provided some useful ways to help you through this crisis. If you have interest in this topic as a live webinar with your team, contact Amanda Myers at amyers@fishandwildlife.org, or you can contact me at michelle@inavaconsulting.com. Thank you.